When you know that success is yours to have. When love and affection calls you to reconnect. When you're eager to start a new day with the courage to make yourself a priority. When it's time to explore and broaden your horizons. Gautrain, the symbol of pride that sets your soul on fire. Convenient and sustainable travel with the time to self-reflect. To lead your team to greatness. Making time for family first. Embrace the life journey ahead. Create remarkable stories for your grandchildren to hear. If you live, work, or play in Gauteng, the Gautrain commends your ambition, determination, and that passion for life and the environment, keeping you on track and driving success. Gautrain, for people on the move.
Knowledge Seminar 2022, and this year's theme is Action Learning for Innovation in Public Transport. I'm Tim Modise. The GMA, that is Gautrain Management Agency, and the GCRO, Gauteng City Region Observatory, concluded a knowledge exchange partnership. They had a memorandum of understanding in the first quarter of 2020. And this partnership is aimed at enhancing the research capability and to strengthen the knowledge sharing initiatives in the public transport sector. In October and November of 2020, the GMA and the GCRO hosted the third installation of the Public Transport Knowledge Seminar, a series of virtual webinar engagements. The thematic focus was on public transport recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic. To ensure continuity and leveraging on the gains made from last year, the GMA and GCRO in partnership will be hosting the fourth installation of the Public Transport Knowledge Seminar. In 2021, the world and South Africa were still very much gripped by the COVID-19 pandemic, and that uncertainty did bring up a lot of challenges. The unprecedented global and local challenges the pandemic brought in such a short period did demand attention and continue to demand such attention. We cannot afford to apply typical problem-solving approaches and solutions to the challenges that are being faced today. Turning to the current challenges, that we had to turn them into opportunities, and that requires new innovative methods of identifying problems and creating out-of-the-box solutions. In 2021, the seminar focused on innovation and brought together a panel of creative non-transport experts to provide a different perspective on these challenges. A range of provocations were provided by the panel. Building from the 2021 seminar experience, this year we're seeking out innovative practices in the transport sector, both those emerging from the seminar as well as new ones. The 2022 Public Transport Knowledge Seminar will focus on action-based learning, and a core part of innovation is the ability to test, to explore and experiment with solutions to learn quickly and to improve. Now, this is how we're going to run this event. The format this year will comprise of a 6-part online seminar for a 2-hour live broadcast, and this consists of 8 panelists, and we will be taking reflections from the past 5 public transport seminars. We'll discuss commercialization as well as innovation opportunities for the Gautrain Management Agency and the Gautrain's 10-year partnership with the taxi industry. And this year's seminar will also provide an opportunity for participants to hear from transport innovators who are actively engaged in action learning. The aim is to provide an opportunity to experience some of the results of innovation, a deep dive into some of the innovations from Gautrain itself. We invite public transport sector practitioners to join us in attending this series of discussions. And of course, we would like to provide a meaningful seminar that embodies the innovation theme throughout.
transport for labor, where we're taking workers from the dormitory cities, dormitory towns, and we're taking them to places where they need to work for 8 hours. We take them home and leave. On a weekend or after hours, when you try to take that same transport, it's much more difficult. We're not thinking about the mothers who are at home for whatever reason, or the care workers who are at home for whatever reason, who need to use the transport during the day to live their lives and to manage their lives.
This is what the country now looks like. 57 million people. Where are those 57 million people? Well, 60 to 70% of them are now in cities. They're urban or peri-urban. So transportation mobility in South Africa for the majority is now urban, and very soon it's not just about the urban, it's about what we call the peri-urban, is how do we connect that donut around the city with the city.
Well, let's get going and reflect on the previous public transport knowledge seminars, as well as the experiences that have been gained over that period of time. And my guest panelists are Mr. Siyabonga Mabaso, who's a senior executive responsible for technical services. Pleasure to have you with us. As well as Jeff Bickford, who's researcher with the Gauteng City Region Observatory. Gentlemen, welcome. A pleasure to have you share your thoughts with us. Let's reflect on the public transport knowledge seminars that we've had so far, the different themes over the years. Starting with you, Sia.
Thank you, Tim. The objective of the seminar has always been very clear. You can see it from the theme, is to share the transport knowledge. So that is, excuse me, that is what has happened over the past. We've made sure that we share the public transport knowledge with the various stakeholders. But it's not only transport information from the transport practitioners themselves. We've also made sure that we share public transport and insights from research institutions, from academia, specialists and institutions, and also from the users of public transport. Because that is when you get the proper perspective of what public transport is and what are the experiences that the people are experiencing when they are using our public transport. So that has been our overall theme, to ensure that this knowledge is shared, and the learnings that we get from public transport, as well as, because the learnings help us to be able to improve our public transport. So that is what has happened in the past few years.
Jeff, as a researcher, you would have a sense of what the public transport users, the commuters, expect from the providers of these services. Typically, what would you say those are?
Yes, as the Gauteng City Region Observatory, one of the core areas of the partnership is around the knowledge seminar for exactly that reason. It's an organization that collects a huge amount of data, research, and is in touch with what's happening in the broader city region. And so what we're seeing in the experience of public transport passengers in the region is a decline in satisfaction, largely, with the public transport experience. Longer travel times, larger safety risks, and an overall dissatisfaction, in fact, with public transport services. So what that leads to is a lot of people really, really desiring to move to private cars. And that's the challenge that public transport practitioners and professionals face, and where I think the Gautrain has been so important.
Sure, and not many people want to buy cars or own cars, and of course be stuck in heavy traffic, especially in Johannesburg, right? But you mentioned something about the decline of the experience when it comes to public transport. Typically, give me examples of that.
Yeah, so if you are a metro rail user who, even pre the pandemic, was reliant on this very cheap, it's the cheapest form of public transport, but provided an essential travel service for the poorest of the poor in cities. And that service decline has continued over many years, to the point where there's very limited service availability for metro rail. During COVID, in fact, a lot of those services stopped. So people were having to pay more to use minibus taxis to travel the same distance that they were using before. And for many, it was unaffordable. So the opportunity to travel, in fact, stopped.
Let's come back to the seminars now. We've had a few already. Let's focus on the specific themes that you addressed over the past few years.
So what we've been trying to see is how do we make public transport attractive? So in order to be able to achieve that, then you need the input from all the other stakeholders. Because public transport is an ecosystem, that enables mobility of people from whether their place of residence to a place of employment and vice versa. But over and above that, we've realized that there is also a need to ensure that, other than just traveling during the morning and the afternoon peak, there is a need for transport during the off-peak periods. And that is for the different markets. It's for your tourists, it's for the people that are not in the mainstream employment, as it were, an artist and the likes. So public transport needs to then encompass all of those. So in our discussion with various stakeholders, it has helped us to see the need to improve some of these services so that mobility is provided for all the commuters in the province.
Well, but I think a lot of commuters, their point of departure up front, it's likely to be the point that Jeff made. Make public transport available. Let's start there. So, what's the problem, Jeff? Why is it not there? Because it's one of those things that, especially in an urban setting such as Gauteng and Joburg specifically, people would expect that it should be there. It used to be there.
Yeah. So I think as an important aspect to answer that is there's a big governance question around the delivery of public transport. And what's so interesting is when the World Cup arrived, the impetus around the World Cup, because we were on the global stage and everyone was watching, there was this desire to deliver better, improved public transport service for many people who didn't have another option. And that led to a wave of almost 15 years of really targeted investment in improved public transport. And since the World Cup has come and gone, we've seen that energy and impetus wane. And so we're not seeing the same level of commitment to improve public transport. And hence we're seeing service decline across many public transport modes. And so I think we don't have all the answers, but I think there are critical governance questions around why are we unable to deliver improved public transport services to our people, even when the world isn't watching.
Sure, and I'm going to probe that subject later on in this webinar. I'm going back to the seminar that you had this past year, where you brought in artists, people who do not necessarily operate in your space and are not necessarily experts when it comes to public transport. What are the key learnings that you drew from there, and how are those going to be applied?
The main learning, obviously, is when you speak to people that are using public transport, they share with you their experience. I mean, the artist that was there shared with us the experience that he had while using public transport to go and perform somewhere. So that helped us to see then how important public transport is, in connecting people, with their opportunities that are there. So, that is what then helps us to see that for us to have a proper public transport service or system, we need to have a proper structure. I think one of the learnings that I personally learned in one of the seminars is exactly that. There was an academic individual that was presenting there, and he made this statement. He says, the behavior of a system is a function of its structure. So Jeff just mentioned that during the World Cup, there was proper structure that enabled people to use public transport. So we want to continue to maintain those structures or governance, as he put it, that will enable public transport to happen for all the people in the province or for all the different and various stakeholders that are using public transport.
Let's talk about the practical experience of Gautrain itself, the operations of Gautrain. It's still available as a mode of transport, and I want to believe that you still keep time and you are always available. Is that correct?
That's definitely correct.
And it leads to another question. Then people ask, if Gautrain can do it, firstly, let me ask this. How has Gautrain, its management and people responsible for operations, managed to keep it going the same way, delivering the same quality of service, probably improving in certain areas, but the same is not experienced in other aspects of railway transport in the country?
I think it's about the level of service that we set ourselves from the onset, where we wanted to ensure that we provide a public transport service that will be punctual and available and on time for the people to be able to commute. And if you look at the objectives of the Gautrain, it was to ensure that we stimulate the economy of the province by connecting the three metros, which is Tshwane, Joburg, as well as the Ekurhuleni, connecting it to the international airport, as well as the financial services that are in the Sandton area and the employment opportunities. So those objectives meant that we needed to have an efficient system that is safe, reliable, because I think when it comes to public transport, safety is still quite a great concern for most commuters. So by providing a safe, reliable public transport, it enabled then for people to have confidence and were able to leave their cars and use public transport because it fulfilled that need, as well as enabling to travel, on time.
Sure, and Gautrain is at the center of this, but we do have the bus services that should link to it, the minibus, taxi services and so on. How do you integrate those other public transport services into the Gautrain services?
I think, Tim, that is key, the thought that you've just mentioned. I mean, Gautrain cannot exist on its own, but it requires to be integrated with other services. So part of that is that we've got a bus service that integrates, but over and above that, what we've done is we've had partnership that we have currently with the taxi industry, where they are providing services to the commuters that are using the Gautrain, and they are able to do this last mile service for our commuters. And that partnership has been in operation for the past 10 years, and it's been very successful. But over and above that, with the planning that is done by the cities, we've seen also the integration that has happened with regards to their services that are integrating with some of our stations, like Park Station, Hatfield, and so forth. So that is key, that we all work together to ensure that we fulfill the needs of the commuters in terms of mobility.
Reflecting on the knowledge that's been gained over time, including from the seminars, Jeff, what is your comment, firstly from the years of experience with Gautrain, and secondly from the seminar that was held the last time around when artists were here?
Yes, I mean, I'd like to talk about how I was challenged as a public transport professional in last year's seminar, and how wonderful it was to have non-transport professionals talking about the transport discipline in new ways and new exciting ways. And some of the things that were mentioned were really stimulating, because the creative aspects that the panel were looking at were things like, when you use the system, any public transport system in the world, they were talking about you could be anywhere. You could be in Paris, New York. These systems don't have their own flavor, their own culture. And so they were reflecting on even using the systems in South Africa, thinking you could be in any system in the world. There's nothing that reflects our identity as Africans in Africa. And they were essentially challenging transport professionals to think about the kind of environment that's created by virtue of being in public space using public transport. And where are the cultural artifacts, the things that stimulate your society and educate people about your culture and your heritage. And so that was one point which I thought was absolutely fantastic, and an opportunity to improve the way that we see ourselves as South Africans and as Africans. And then just one second point was this notion of innovation. And I think the panel really challenged us to think about, what is innovation really? It's about trying new things. And in order to try new things, you have to move into what they termed the liminal phase, which is the phase where you actually don't know. You've left the platform, or you've left your comfort zone, and you've moved into a space that you don't know. And so they linked creativity to courage, which I thought was so powerful. And the attendees of the seminar really latched onto that idea. And we had this discussion about the importance of overcoming fear in trying to solve problems in new ways as something that was critical for transport professionals. And so it added real flavor to the way that we think about our work as transport practitioners, and challenged us to think about where we have opportunities to think about the challenges we face differently.
Well, let me latch onto that, because our theme this time around is action learning for innovation in public transport. It's one thing to discuss, to learn, it's another to apply. So the action, Sia, is what we would like to know a little bit more about. After learning, what happened?
Yes, I think it is important to learn and also even to learn to what other international countries are doing. But at the end of the day, it's important to also look at our own situations in our own country and say, what are the solutions that are only the solutions that are for this country? You know, because I mean, we cannot just go and copy and paste as is, as we have our own problems, so we require our own solution. But we will only be able to find those solutions by experimenting and testing to see if those solutions are effective. But when we do that, we are going to fail in some of them. But we shouldn't be afraid of failing, going back to courage, so that we can be able to find a solution that will fulfill the needs of our commuters. I think, you know, that is one of the brave things that we did as the Gautrain when we made partnership with the taxi industry. Even up until today, some people still ask, how do you work with the taxi industry? But the reason why it's successful is because we've created a structure, and they understand the structure because we've explained it to them in their own terms so that they can be able to understand. So that experiment, that started as an experiment, is one of the greatest success that we see now, but it helped us also to see that we need to work with others in order to provide solutions to our commuters. So action is important, and we need courage to do it.
But the artists might have given you homework when they discussed with you the last time, right? What kind of homework did they give you? And if they were here and are asking, did you deliver on what we suggested, what would you say, Jeff?
So one of the things that they started with was actually the disconnect of government, bureaucracy, with creativity. And so we built these organizations that in a way don't allow and afford the creativity, the space to experiment, the space to fail, because they lock you into time and rigid plans. And so they opened with that, almost making an awareness of the fact that these organizations, in fact, don't celebrate creativity in the way that they perform. And so, in honesty, if they were sitting here, they would probably still be challenging and saying, it's too slow. Why aren't you trying more? Why aren't you inviting more people into the conversation, more creative people, more artisanal people to support and enhance what you're doing? And I think that that's a rallying cry that transport professionals should take hold of, because what COVID taught us was that everything you thought you know can be swept right out from under you. And the world as you know it can change in the blink of an eye. And having more people who understand problems differently allow you to enter that new world with more confidence and, you know, and more courage. And so I think they would be challenging us. I think they would be saying we haven't done enough. And I think that there's room, you know, there's always room for more creativity. So the one thing they did say, which really, I suppose, touched me in a way, was that as transport professionals, we lean towards the technical. It's overly technical. We think it's a technical profession. And what they were saying was, in fact, if you just stop and you listen to what people are experiencing, what they need, what they desire, you know, what they hope in their lives, you could probably start thinking about solutions that meet people where they're at and are more human-centered. And so I think that that's a call that we would need to take forward, and I think the sector needs to improve on moving forward.
Sure, and the sector basically is an ecosystem that's based on partnerships and the experience that you've had. Dealing with today's challenges and going forward, Sia, as we conclude, what do you think we should take away from an engagement such as this one?
I think what is key is to know that partnerships are critical for us to be able to achieve the goals that we need. I think we've done well in partnering with other public transport sectors or stakeholders, but what is even more important is to partner with the commuters. Let's partner with them and really, just as Jeff mentioned, understand their needs so that we can be able to provide the solutions that are required. And at the same time, what I've also learned in my experience is that there is so much that you can learn from those stakeholders. So it is for us not to partner with them because we want to tell them our plans, but because we want to learn from them so that we can be able to implement the solutions that fulfills their mobility needs.
Siyabonga Mabaso, thank you very much. Senior Executive responsible for technical services We appreciate your insights and your input. And Jeff Bickford, researcher with the Gauteng City Region Observatory, thanks again for sharing with us your own experience and observation. We'll continue with the discussions around action learning for innovation in public transport. Well, these discussions matter. These seminars matter. Ricky Stoch took part last year in the seminar, and she has been tasked with wayfinding. She's going to share thoughts with us. She's a human-centered designer, but we'll hear from Ricky Stoch in a moment.
Hello, I'm Ricky, and I'm the founder of Studio Fundi. Studio Fundi is a human-centered design consultancy that uses a combination of behavioral science and visual communication to solve problems, change behavior, and communicate big ideas. What this means is that we help businesses create innovative products and services that put their users first. My relationship with the GMA started last year when I was approached to advise on ways in which innovation and human-centered design could be integrated into the network. This year I was asked, where would you start? Now, there are services, good services, and great services, and naturally the goal is to design a great service. And that's done by answering all three of the following questions in the affirmative. Does the service work? Is it easy to use? And is it satisfying for the user? Now, the Gautrain itself works, that is to say it gets passengers from point A to point B. But for many, it's not that easy to use. And there are several reasons for this, but my gripe, and that of many others, is that the network's wayfinding is particularly confusing. At this point, it's important that I explain what I mean when I say wayfinding. Wayfinding are the mechanisms that help individuals navigate a space and can be both explicit, like signage, or implicit, like the direction of an escalator. And these variables can be changed and adapted to help individuals navigate using both their conscious and subconscious. And so when I was asked where would I start, wayfinding was my immediate suggestion, and that's exactly what we did. What I'm going to tell you about today is the results of the research we conducted in the first of a three-phased project towards improving the passenger's experience on the Gautrain. With that in mind, I'd like to start by saying that there was an overarching theme that came out of my research, and that is that the wayfinding on the network was not designed with the nuance of a South African culture in mind. And the more time that I spent on the network observing passengers and talking to the security staff, the clearer it became that the design of the network's wayfinding is deeply rooted in that of an international rapid transit network, such as those in London, New York, or Paris. The first way that this lack of nuance displays itself is in the way that South Africans define what it means to be lost. Regardless of the station I was on, I would have a variation of the same conversation with the security guards. I would ask, do passengers get lost on the network? And the guard would reply emphatically every time that they didn't. I would then ask, do they ever ask you for directions? And the security would laugh and say, yes, all the time, it's a huge problem. And there were several reasons that they gave for why they thought people were asking for directions, but ultimately, and as someone who's currently commuting between London and Johannesburg, I can say that this interaction is very indicative of South African culture. In London and in other international metropolitans with bigger and more established transit networks, a passenger is considered lost if they can't find a sign. In fact, in my experience, especially in London, passengers would rather be lost than ask for directions. On the Gautrain, the opposite is true. The passenger is considered lost if they can't find someone to ask. South Africans would rather ask for directions than find or read the signage. In reassessing the network's wayfinding, we need to strike the balance between the locals who default to asking for directions and the tourists who would rather be stuck in limbo between escalators in search of a sign telling them which way is up and which way is down. The second big issue I found is that the network signage relies on the passenger knowing not only the direction of, but the relationship between the north, south, west, and east of the city. Unlike Manhattan, which is built on a grid, or London, where every road has a postcode that corresponds to where you are geographically, Johannesburg is a sprawling city, and the majority of the residents know three things. Soweto is in the south, Sandton is in the north, and broadly speaking, the airport is somewhere in the East Rand. Beyond that, our understanding of how these landmarks relate to one another geographically is relatively non-existent. In the context of the Gautrain, this is a problem because the line names and signage is entirely determined by north, south, west, and east. The fact that Sandton is west of Marlborough doesn't mean that a Joburger will intuitively make that connection, because to a Joburger, Sandton is north. I use Marlborough as an example because this is one of the stations that causes the most confusion, but the problem is network-wide. This is my favorite example at Hatfield, where the station has one line, two trains, and they both only go in one direction to the same destination. Still, I watched passenger after passenger stare blankly at the signs and then ask for directions. South Africans navigate using landmarks, and the signage needs to reflect that. The final problem I isolated is that there simply aren't enough maps on the station, and where there are enough maps, they're often aerial maps which are hard to understand or are poorly located. I had one particularly enlightening conversation with two security guards at Park Station where I was told that in fact there were too many maps on the platform, but that passengers could only find them if they were shown where they are. For wayfinding to be effective, a passenger should never have to actively look for a map or a sign. There should always be one within their line of sight. I could go into a lot more detail, but for now I'll say that the research is done and it's time to design, iterate, innovate, and improve the Gautrain signage by strategically using both explicit and implicit interventions to improve the passenger experience on the network. Thank you.
And thank you, Ricky. And now, this next panel, we are going to talk about innovation in the public transport sector, but talking about other partnerships. Lindiwe Matebula is the Gautrain Management Agency specialist for transport planning. And Lindiwe, thank you for joining us. Olivia Maponya is founder, executive director of Kopano Bus Company. Thanks again, man, for joining us. Now, Kopano Bus Company is based in Limpopo, right? Yes. And then we are here talking Gautrain and public transport here in Gauteng. I know a little bit about why you are here, but I would like you to tell me a bit more about the relationship that you have with public transport, especially Gautrain's perspective on public transport.
Thank you so much, Tim. I think, let me give a background of Kopano Bus Service.
Yeah.
Kopano Bus Service is a commuter transport company. We operate in similar services as Gautrain on the bus side. That is where our common services, come into the picture, wherein we bring in value to the, nation. So Kopano Bus Service is currently operating in Limpopo Province, in the Capricorn District Municipality, in Polokwane and in Leboahomo. So our offerings to the to the public is giving them services in terms of giving services to the poorest of the poor in the province. We're not doing that alone. We're doing that on behalf of the Department of Transport. So that's where we offer our services to.
Okay, well, we'll talk about action or innovation in action in the public transport sector in a moment, but I'm also curious about partnership with the taxi industry. Lindiwe, from Gautrain's point of view, what kind of partnership do you have with the taxi industry?
All right, so I think it's over a decade ago, just over a decade ago, we celebrated the 10 years of this partnership last year. So basically, the Gautrain entered into a partnership with the minibus taxi industry to provide a transport service for our commuters. And I mean, this partnership, the overarching reason behind, you know, this partnership is the legislative mandate by the GMA Act to integrate the Gautrain with other modes of transport, which then also include the taxis. And I think after the construction of our station at Marlborough, there were no Gautrain buses operating at that station due to a demand forecast study that was conducted prior to the commencement of the project. So there was a need then to provide a first and last mile solution for passengers from Marlborough Station. And that's basically how the partnership with the taxi industry was formed.
Differentiate the partnership of the taxi industry with yourselves from the Gautrain buses. What's the difference?
All right, so the Gautrain buses are part of the concession agreement. You know that the Gautrain is part of a PPP project where we do have concession partners, and the Gautrain buses form part of that concession agreement. Whereas with the minibus taxi industry, that was basically a variation from the current concession agreement, and that's how we basically entered into that partnership with the minibus.
How does it work? I mean, are they being subsidized in any way?
Yeah, so through this innovative contracting model that we have developed, that basically enables the minibus taxi industry to contract, you know, with the Gautrain to provide, you know, a transport service. Yeah, so that's how, you know, it was really formed.
And you're happy with the partnership so far, and why is that?
Yes, so actually let me just go back to the subsidies as well. As part of the contracting model, we have developed a financial cost model that basically assesses the viability, the financial viability of the service, but we also calculate the operating costs, labor costs, and also some profits that are embedded onto that model. And that's basically how we subsidize, you know, the taxi industry through this financial cost model.
I'll come back to that point because there might be a lot of lessons learned that can be expanded to other parts of the country. Let me go back to you, Olivia, and talk about Kopano bus service in Limpopo and the Capricorn region in particular. We're talking innovation in action. In your line of business, how do you express this innovation in action?
Thank you. Understanding innovation is creating value, but how do we create that value? We create value through knowledge and through science. And given Limpopo is a very remote and rural province, I would cite some few challenges. In looking at those challenges as Kopano Bus Service, we don't just see challenges, but we want to see opportunities in those challenges. Firstly, I would touch on the issue that currently as the nation we're sitting with in terms of water scarcity in our areas. Buses need to be cleaned, need to be washed every day. But here we are sitting with a problem, with the challenge of a shortage of water. How do we come about that challenge? So we are currently, doing studies in terms of having a new technology wherein we can clean our buses without using waterless kind of system that will assist us in terms of saving the little that we can have for people's consumption. And another thing, looking at the industry in general, we understand that transport industry is still male dominated. As Kopano Bus Service, we have thought about that and say, okay, we cannot leave this situation like that. We need to contribute back to the community, back to the society. How do we get around that? As I've indicated, that we are a subsidized operation wherein Department of Transport also contributes to our business financially. We also need to extend our hand in terms of reaching out to these communities. So currently we have embarked in a program wherein we are in the process of recruitment as we're talking now, recruiting 200 youth females, so that they can also come and contribute significantly in the economy within the transport sector. So we're going to train them from having nothing in terms of driving skills. So we're going to train them and give them the driving skills and defensive skills, so that those are some of the modules that will come with the program, so that once they're done with the skills program, then they will be given opportunities to contribute as well in the economic sector within the transport sector. But we don't want it to end there. We need to create more leaders in the transport industry. It is not okay that when you go out, meeting, other leaders in the industry, you still find yourself being the only woman or only 2 women out of 50 men who are in the industry. It's still, for me, I think it's about us women also to contribute back to the communities for opportunities that are there, to say, come on, ladies, there are opportunities here, come and join us so that we can grow the transport economy together.
And any particular lessons that you may have learned in your partnership with Gautrain as you interact with them, and of course through the public transport knowledge seminars such as this one?
Very true, yes. We're looking at knowledge management. Knowledge is power, and I think the mistake that most of the organizations are doing is that whatever that we do today, we forget about it, we move on. We forget that what we do today is building up as the basis of what will happen in the future and tomorrow. So with the partnership with GMA is that we want to build knowledge management in terms of integration of our digital systems, because currently in Kopano Bus Service we do have very beautiful digital systems, but those systems are working in silo. So we need now to come up with one platform wherein we can manage all these systems and find that collaborative approach wherein from just the click of one button you can be able to get all the information from different systems around us. Yeah.
Lindiwe, you have the experience already of the partnership with the taxi industry, and you are able to subsidize them, but it's not something that applies throughout the country, right? On the back of the experience of working with the taxi industry, and the relationship has been sustained for quite a while. 10 years is a long time. Where do you think this model can be applied? And can it be applied on the back of your experience?
Yes, so I mean, this model, as I said, it's an innovative model, and it's first of its kind, that was actually developed, where you find that, a government entity is able to partner with the taxi industry. And I think what I appreciate about this model as well is that it's based on our environment. It's not a model that was cut and paste from another country. It takes into account our legal structures in South Africa. It takes into account how, the minibus taxi operates, how they get the operating license. And those are the things that are actually embedded, in this model that we have developed. So I think, it can be, it can be all, what's the word? Expanded, yes, yes, it can be expanded to other parts, especially in terms of other transport modes as well. But I think what is important is to realize the uniqueness of this model, and to say when you're applying it in another transport mode, what are the unique factors in that transport mode, and what is the legislation saying as well with regards to such an initiative. But broadly speaking, I think it can really be, transformed and used in other transport modes as well.
Sure. Just before we conclude, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the integration of the different stakeholders in the provision of public transport in South Africa, because from an outsider's point of view, it seems to me that in the main, the different role players operate in silos. So you have the trains generally as the trains. Then you have Gautrain as Gautrain. Then you have the bus companies as bus companies. Then you have the taxi industry as the taxi industry on its own. But at the end of the day, a commuter would like to see and experience a seamless delivery of the transport services. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, honestly, I think it has been a debate for some time now. At the level of national government, Department of Transport, in which the integration of services should be, experienced by mostly the passengers. Wherein, if I have one tech, that tech should be used in the buses, in the taxis, in the trains. That would be seamless for the passengers, and that will be the value that will be created for the consumers of the services. And what I believe in as well is that this small piece of cake should also be shared across all these modes of transport. It shouldn't be about buses getting subsidized or trains being subsidized. What about the taxi industry? My belief is that the taxi industry is also a complementer to the buses and to the trains. It's not about taxi industry, of which many of the people will think that taxis are actually competing the buses and the trains. That is not correct. Taxis are complementing the buses and the train systems. So we need to share the small piece of cake, but the value created should be more beneficial to the passengers of this country. And by so doing, we'll be enticing the passengers to come back to the use of the public transport services, and we'll be dealing away with most of the issues that we have now in terms of the road congestions.
Accidents, and you name it, and
Yes.
people who cannot afford cars or who don't want to own cars, being forced
Yes.
to own cars. And Lindiwe, your take on this question, your own views?
Yeah, so I think when I started, I said, as part of the GMA Act, we are mandated to provide integrated services with the Gautrain. But I think actually thinking about it, it should not only be a GMA mandate, it should be a national mandate that enforces that integration of different modes of transport. Because actually when you really think about it from a commuter point of view, that integration, it makes sense. Not only from a physical integration, but operationally fair integration. I know we've touched on the one ticket sort of system. So I think from a commuter point of view, that integration makes sense. And I think we need to start thinking more into customer-centric, innovation, so that we make sure that our customers get the best experience on our system. They get to experience the best and and to be able to use public transport as compared to private vehicles. But obviously with public transport as well, there are other factors that you need to think about, the convenience, the safety as well, on our public transport. So that's when the innovation comes in to say, how do we enhance, safety? How do we make our public transport attractive to our customers? So in everything that we do, we need to always think of the customer in the middle.
The experience and the value.
The value, definitely.
And all the issues that you've mentioned, safety, cost, and all of that. Yes. I appreciated your inputs, ladies. Thanks very much for talking to me about your special areas of work and expertise. I appreciate that.
Thank you for having us.
Olivia Maponya and Lindiwe Matebula, thanks again. Now, we're going to talk about application of knowledge and innovation based on the experience since the establishment of Gautrain. What have we learned over the years? And what is there still to be done? Jacques van der Merwe is going to talk to me in a moment. It's the Gauteng Transport Authority. We'll be talking to him shortly. Mr. Jacques van der Merwe, Gauteng Transport Authority CEO, is with me to discuss the challenges and solutions to the public transport needs of the citizens who live in Gauteng and, of course, elsewhere. Once it's done right here, then everybody can learn from there. And you bring with you, Jacques van der Merwe, experience. I mean, you were there in the early days of the planning and the setting up of the Gautrain. Let's just briefly reflect on how the whole Gautrain project was rolled out.
Well, I went to Germany with Turkish Equator in June of 1997, where we went to Bavaria, and he said to Herrströmer, the Chancellor of Bavaria, we had to buy a train, and Jacques van der Merwe was going to buy it. So that's where we started. Yeah. And it's been I left the train in 2020. So,
yeah. But quite an experience and a half, I suppose, right? And we've been talking about integration of public transport in Gauteng for quite a while. You are now the CEO of Gauteng Transport Authority. What are you working on? I mean, what is your focus?
Well, it was discussed earlier today, is that you need an integrated public transport plan, because any form of public transport has to link to the next one. Because the biggest loss in time is actually when you transfer modes. And that's what will people would not, if you go with a taxi to a station and you don't know when the next train is coming, or to a bus stop and you don't know, but then people will stay away because the total trip time will do. So integrated planning is a big issue. And in South Africa, because we have a history of spatial distortion, land use planning and transport planning coordination is absolutely crucial. And unfortunately, I have to say we haven't got that right yet. We still have people living very far away from where they work, and the home work trip becomes very long, very expensive, and not affordable.
Jack, there was a time in South Africa where as much as more needed to be done, but using a train was a taken for granted type of service in the areas where trains were available, right? People depended largely on railway or rail travel as a means of getting to and from work. But today, the situation is the opposite. What's going on there?
Well, throughout the world, rail forms the backbone, and the reason is really two things. Rail runs on a dedicated right-of-way, so it shouldn't stop for anything. And secondly, the capacity that it has to move 60, 70,000 passengers per direction per hour. But unfortunately, in our country, rail has lost its glow. We've come down from 700 million passengers per year in 2009 to just before COVID to 126 million passengers. So we've lost 570 million passengers, and that's where the problem is.
But how did that happen? I mean, I can tell you my own personal stories, experiences that if I wanted to go to town, go to the movies, go to school, go anywhere, and the train was the way to go. But today, in the community that I come from, we don't see any trains anymore.
Yeah, I think a lesson to be learned from Gautrain is that your customer is looking for two things. He's looking for punctuality and availability. Because if he has punctuality and availability, he or she can plan his trip. And Metro Rail's punctuality and availability fell far below the acceptable norms. Just before the COVID, they were having a 60% availability. So it meant that if you stand on the platform, you have 40% chance that the train won't come. And then if the train comes, the average delay was 42 minutes. And that's really where you find, if you do a customer-centric design, you have to look after punctuality and availability.
Now, being with the Gauteng Transport Authority yourself, what ideas are you working on to correct these anomalies, these problems?
Well, the first thing we're working on is to put the groundwork here. The National Land Transport Act is actually the act that keeps everything going in transport. And in the act, they say that the province must develop a provincial land transport framework. So this is setting the norms and the standards. We finished with that. We will publish within the next 3 or 4 weeks the draft, the LTF. So that's the one part. The other part is that, in infrastructure, you need a very long planning horizon. So in 2013, the department did an integrated transport master plan for 25 years, and we are busy reviewing that. And then there's 2 plans that have to be developed in terms of our act. One is a strategic transport plan, and the other one that I think is quite innovative is a integrated implementation plan. So we aren't saying we're just going to plan it. What, can we put our money where our mouth is?
Let's talk about the ideal situation. We live in a highly urbanized region of the country with 3 major metros, Tshwane, Joburg, Ekurhuleni. And I know there was talk at some point that, people who live at least in those 3 metros should find it easy to commute anywhere, anytime, and find cheaper modes of public transport. So what is the ideal means, you think?
Of course, the more usage you have of public transport, the more affordable it can be because your income stream is improving. What we have as a negative in Gauteng, we're only 1.42% of the land area. We have 25% of the population here. So congestion, pollution is a big issue. So we have to find a solution that will address the environment, that will address these delays we have in that. And the only way to do that is to move towards public transport. We are in the changing world of transport, where I read this morning in the newspaper, they will not allow internal combustion engine car to be built in Europe by 2035. So you won't be able to build a car there anymore. It has to be either hydrogen fuel cells or battery.
This is only 12 years away.
12 years away. And you know, if we look at us, we have a very good motor manufacturing industry in our country. We export 200,000 units per year. And they have to change, because otherwise we won't have a market to send it to. So there are really big changes happening. And you know, the changes has got to do with training, with skills development, with upskilling the workforce. So there is going to happen a lot of things in the next year.
We're talking about innovation in action.
Yeah.
Right? In this discussion and this webinar. But there was talk some time ago that we will have one ticketing solution for all modes of transport in Gauteng. What happened to that? I mean, taking advantage of modern technologies. Yeah. And of course, we talk about smart cities as well, integrated living areas and people working closer to their homes or homes being closer to work, all of those things together. But yeah, technology.
Yes, we actually, the GMA has contracted to do that one ticketing. The only thing about one ticketing is that the hardware and the software for the ticket itself is relatively easy. But you need a back office. You need a back office of banking that'll read your card and take the money to the right owner. And in South Africa, we have a lot of people who are not bankable, who don't have bank cards. So our single ticket will work on a prepaid system. So there are a few challenges, but we are getting there.
But the different role players, are they buying into this new approach or not? Because, you know, let's tell it the way it is. The way of thinking is different from one role player to the other to the other. Others are receiving subsidies, others are not.
Yeah. No, there is a buy-in of this, and you know, every premier that we've had, it's non-negotiable. They want the one ticket. It's just that when you go overseas, you can take your credit card and you can tap, and there's an algorithm that runs to see what's the cheapest. That to us is not possible because everybody doesn't have access to a credit card.
Now, you spoke about the different plans as well as laws that are going to be passed and documents that are going to be made public for comment and so on. But when are we going to see, in practice, some of the ideas being applied?
Well, I think as we're rolling it out, you will see now at the end of the month when we bring out the PLTF, the Provincial Land Transport Framework, what is our plan? What is the umbrella under which we want to do it? I think another thing that TAG is doing is moving closer to local authorities, because if one talks about public transport and we have a global city region where when you travel, you don't know whether you're going from Tshwane into Ekurhuleni into Johannesburg. It's an invisible boundary that you're going to. So how do we bind them in? And what the legislature has done is that my board consists half of people representing the local authorities and half transport experts. So we're moving there, but I can sense your frustration that it's not moving as fast as we thought. But I think we're putting down the building blocks. We're busy with the BRTs. We're busy with refurbishing Metro Rail. So I think at some stage in the near future, these things will come together.
Jack van der Merwe, thank you very much for talking to us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is early hours of the morning already, and Lwazi is tossing and turning, not being able to sleep. How is she going to survive at work tomorrow? Her mind is occupied by thoughts of her deliberately withholding a crucial piece of information from her colleagues, thinking, like she always does, she can gain competitive advantage. Of what use is that information to her now, if not shared with others? On a morning commute, Lwazi tries to stay awake by surfing the net and comes across wise words shared by the Dalai Lama. Share your knowledge. It's a way to achieve immortality. Like a flash, she's invigorated by those words, suddenly wide awake. Lwazi can barely sit still whilst waiting for the meeting to start. There is so much she wants to share. At last, she gets her chance. She tells her colleagues that they can strengthen their company's sustainability by sharing knowledge. No longer is she going to work in a silo or not share experiences. And neither would they. Lwazi shines in the spotlight. Her colleagues seem excited about her tactics of knowledge management that will benefit them all in future. The value of working together, skills development, mentorship. And she goes on to create a shared vision for them. Everyone seems intrigued and excited. Answering some questions raised by her colleagues, Lwazi explains how knowledge management includes harvesting and capturing knowledge from all disciplines to unlock possibilities that will contribute to sustainability. Not only does Lwazi herself feel invigorated through what she has just shared, but her colleagues are also awakened to these revolutionary possibilities. Collectively, they can shift towards a continuous, proactive momentum of knowledge management. What a great day! Lwazi lies comfortably in her bed, feeling fulfilled and optimistic about the future. Before she drifts off to sleep, her last thoughts are that of gratefulness. Certainly not for immortality, but for changing her behavior, having a knowledge management plan, and contributing through knowledge sharing to a thriving, sustainable community.
Experience, customer service, integration, these are some of the key concepts that are coming up in our discussions as we discuss action or innovation in action when it comes to public transport. And this is the Public Transport Knowledge Seminar for 2022. Ravi Pillay is the Gautrain Management Agency's Chief Commercial Officer. Welcome, Ravi.
Thank you, sir.
And Nico Nkuna is the Gautrain Management Agency Executive Manager for Digital Products, Mobility as a Service. And welcome, Nico.
Thank you, sir.
Right. You had a knowledge seminar last year, and people have been asking for innovation and more of it. For now, we only know Gautrain as people who provide us with the rail service from Joburg or Pretoria to the airport, or airport to those, and that's about it. Are you doing anything new that's interesting, that is outside the box type of idea?
I think, Tim, thank you, and I'll take that. Thank you for having us. And I think essentially, you know, if you want to establish innovation in a business, you need a structure that can drive innovation. And if you look at our current context of our current economic climate, you know, you've got state-owned entities that are having to do far more with a lot less financial resources. And that has realized the need for some sort of pivot or change in our current business environment, and hence the requirement for a commercialization approach. So as management, we could do one of two things. We could sit back and wait for the economy to change, or we could have quite a deliberate intervention and take a pivot and look at what some of the industry best practices are globally and transform the business for that pivot. We then established and made a decision that we should have a commercialization business model, and that's what you see here sitting in front of you. In terms of what we're doing now, the commercialization unit has been established and baselined around 4 key areas of dynamic innovation and change. We're looking at our rail and property model, and that's essentially leveraging our current asset model to give you a more enhanced experience for our consumers. So that talks to looking at a customer potentially looking to live, work, and play in the current environment that that we exist in. We have retail amenities, that's the likes of DLTC's new service offerings, coffee shops, and value-added enhanced service for our consumers. And then we have something called agency services. And this is very unique in the SOE space, where you have a level of skill and expertise in your business environment, that you can then offer and support other institutions with in terms of helping them drive and deliver their mandate. And then lastly, we have something called mobility as a service. And that's taking digital products and digital technologies and products and delivering a new customer offering through the value chain of digital technologies.
I just want to pick up on what you mentioned about the skills that you may have in an organization such as yours, and you leverage of such skills. So for example, what can people at Gautrain do beyond making sure that trains run on time and the experience of the customer is as best as it can be?
So I think when you look at a skills model, you've got to look at it holistically. So remember, Gautrain is a corporate structure with a very strong human capital component to it, a legal component, technical component, technical expertise, and a commercial business environment. So when you cut across multiple disciplines, and even from an ICT perspective, when you cut across multiple disciplines, you find yourself being able to offer solutions to other institutions across their whole value chain. And by doing that, you tend to become a versatile offering. So our skill sets are not unique to technical solutions. Sure. Our skill sets are unique to changing institutions holistically. And that's part of what the Growing Gauteng Together mandate stands for, improving our state-owned institutions and making them more robust. So we believe in Gautrain that we have a structure and an institutional capability that can help transform many institutions in driving their future growth.
Well, you've innovated a bit. You've introduced new offerings, apparently driver's licenses now. Just go up to where? Any one of the Gautrain stations, and then you can renew your driver's license. So how does it work, Nico?
All right, so I think the first thing that needs to be recognized is the fact that this was an initiative by the Department of Roads and Transport. So the GMA is an agency of the Department of Roads and Transport. So they were faced with a challenge to where they had a huge backlog of motorists whose driver's licenses had not been renewed due to the various lockdowns that we experienced as a country because of COVID-19. And they looked for solutions. And one of the agencies, or one of the areas where they look for solutions, is at the GMA as their agency. And what we then did, we stepped in and worked with them as well as other key stakeholders to establish DLTCs at the Gautrain stations. So we've been given approval to establish 4. So a DLTC is a driving license testing center.
Okay, good.
So we've been given approval to establish 4. So we've already established 3 at the moment. One at the Midrand Gautrain station, the second one at the Centurion Gautrain station, and we also have 1 at our offices. And the reason we implemented the 1 at our offices, it was just a pilot center to enable us to understand that business and make sure that we can actually do it excellently before we actually take it to the station.
Let me understand something. The driving license testing centers, it sounds like you come and you take a driver's license test. Or what does it mean, really, in practical terms? That's not where people come to apply for driver's licenses, but to renew. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes, so in fact, there are various grades of DLTCs. So our DLTC is the grade F DLTC, which means we only provide renewal services. We only provide renewal services for driving licenses and for PRDPs, and we do issue temporary.
Always help me with
the jargon.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So PRDP is professional driving permits.
Okay.
Yeah. So for for public transport drivers and logistics drivers and so on. So those are some of the services that we offer. So we are able to renew driving licenses for the public, for anyone in the public, and we are able to renew professional driving permits for professionals.
And how many people have taken this opportunity to use your centers?
So far up to now, I mean, we've been operational since January this year, and we've renewed over 25,000 licenses. And in terms of the transactions that we've done over 50,000 transactions. So that means that not only did we do renewals of driving licenses, we also did temporary driver's licenses, we also did PRDPs, and that in total comes to about to over 50,000 transactions.
Now, the digital solutions and the innovations that are taking place within your space, there was talk earlier, Ravi, you mentioned something about mobility solutions. I wasn't sure. Are you going into banking, or what are you doing? Are you developing apps, or what is the direction you're taking, or the opportunities that you see on that front?
All right, so on that front, so we are also assisting the Department of Roads and Transport in implementing a single ticketing system for the province. And we realized that to actually implement that is not just having a single ticket. You also have to make sure that the public transport service is integrated from various levels, from a policy level, from an operational level, and from other various levels that it operates in. But in addition to that, then you add technology to enable those services to be integrated. So as an example, if we do implement, when we do implement a single ticketing system, we need to make sure that all the public transport services in the province have the necessary technology, either in the vehicles, in their stations, or in the ranks, or whatever the facilities are being utilized by that public transport operator. We need to make sure that there's the right level of technology, and we need to ensure that we can integrate the technology so that with one single ticket, you are able to hop onto a bus, you're able to hop onto a taxi, you're able to hop onto a train, or any public transport service. So our responsibility is to assist the Department of Roads and Transport in Gauteng to ensure that that happens. And we use our skills in terms of technical skills and experience to ensure that we can enable that.
I want to go back to the key thing that I think keeps coming up when we discuss public transport. That is one thing to move commuters from point A to point B, but the customer service and the experience are important. And as you innovate, make sure that you don't lose sight of the core offering. So what would you say the experience has been so far, Ravi, for your customers?
Look, I think we have a standard. There's a Gautrain standard. And whatever we do, whatever we depart from that standard, whatever we do beyond the service of A to B, we have to either match or elevate that standard. And that's the nature of our brand. So when we developed the DLTC, or the licensing centers, the innovative licensing centers, we needed to develop a structure or an operation that matches the standard and the offering that we currently have on the Gautrain system. And hence the requirement for innovating in terms of the overall asset, the infrastructure that we put down, the digital technologies that we put into it, the nature of the operation and the services, and also the workforce that we've trained and groomed into offering a value-added customer service that meets the brand and associates with the brand. So when you walk into our licensing centers, and this will be the precedence for anything we put forward going forward, you will have an experience that you've never experienced in the public domain. Okay, and that's because we've associated it to the nature of what the Gautrain brand stands for. As you walk in, the nature of where you address, the type of technology that we're using in terms of advancing the offering, the time you spend at our facility, the fact that we're completely sustainable, we're off the grid, so we never have challenges with power. You will always be guaranteed...
Never offline.
Never offline, yes. You will always be guaranteed a level of service that is superior in the public domain.
Sure.
That's how we've driven innovation forward.
And of course, with the digital solutions that you're working on, and as we conclude, I'd like to hear from you, Nico. What can your partners learn or benefit from the innovations that you are introducing?
Thank you. So I think starting with the DLTCs, so the innovations that we've implemented were meant to enhance customer experience, to make sure that the service has been improved. So as an example, the time it takes to be processed at the traditional DLTC is actually a factor of the number of points that where you have to get serviced. So you have to go to a station to be examined. After that, queue on another queue to pay. So what we've done is that we've put all of that together on one desk so that a person is only serviced by one person. So that halves the time that the person has to, that takes a person to get their driver's license renewed. So the point I'm trying to make is that innovation needs to be anchored on customer experience or enhancing customer experience. So what I think our partners can learn and use out of this is that designing innovation, designing technology in such a way that it promotes enhancements of customer experience. And when you design whatever technology or whatever solutions that you provide or a service that you provide, you have to think about the customer at first and then use the technology as an enabler. And we have done a great job of implementing that. And we think that our partners in government and other institutions can be able to come to us and learn what we have done and be able to apply it in their environment.
Ravi, last thoughts from you. I mean, we've heard about what you've done up to now. Any new ideas going forward that will definitely contribute to making Gautrain stand out? What are those?
I think in the short term, we continue to create value-added services. I think that's critical. You know, enhance the customer experience, allow customers to gravitate towards stations, offer more than an A to B trip. So convenience, retail, coffee shops, places to meet, making stations rather destinations than points, points of departure. So that's what we're bringing into the system right now, and we're constantly creating to do that. But I just want to touch on one thing, Tim, around this, is that in order for you to drive this kind of agenda, you've got to be very intentional about what you're doing. You have to have a clear plan, you've got to be strategic about it, and you've got to have the right team, creative implementers, implementation as well as technical skills to deliver such a mandate, because it's a constant innovation process and you're constantly thinking through it. So you've got to have that in place in order to drive an agenda like this.
Gentlemen, good luck and thanks very much for sharing with us the innovations that you're working on and the impact that they're having on your customers, the commuters, and of course the lessons that your partners can draw from this. I appreciate it, Nico and Ravi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. So how it works is that as a citizen or as an applicant, the first thing you do is that you go to Modise online. That is, you can get it on Google. You just go to Google and just type Modise online. It will give you the link to the Modise online web portal, where you can then make a booking. So how you make a booking is that you select the area that you want to renew your license at. So in our case, it's Midrand. So anyone who wants to renew their license at Midrand, they have two options at the moment. They have the DLTC facility that we are running at our offices at the Gautrain Management Agency on 44 Grand Central Boulevard, Midrand. So, and then the second option they have is to renew here, which is the Gautrain Station Midrand DLTC. So when a customer has selected that, or when an applicant has selected this facility here or our facility at the office, then they get to choose the slot that they want to come in at. Once they've chosen a slot, they will then get a confirmation that gives them that confirms the time that they can come to the facility, as well as the address. They will be welcomed by an usher who will then ask them what service they want to do. In a form, there's a form. Once they've completed that form, they will then be ushered by the same usher to the examiner.
Well, we've had a very interesting discussion up to now, touching different areas of public transport as we try to expand on the knowledge that is being generated and has been generated over the years, particularly by Gautrain. Siyabonga, thanks very much for coming back, and wrapping it up for me, I mean, from where we started to where we are now, what would you say the contribution is to the broadening knowledge or the broadening of knowledge in the public transport sector?
Thank you, Tim. It's been such a stimulating discussion to hear, the other stakeholders in public transport expressing themselves of how they've acted in making sure that they innovate in public transport, as it were. So I think, the pinch points that we saw how important it is to collaborate, how important it is to share the stories or our journeys of where we come from and what impact we've had in public transport. It was stimulating to see that, and I'm sure the audience enjoyed the discussions that we've had. But I think what is key that we've seen is that it is so important to collaborate and form partnerships, not only with public transport in the industry, but also with other stakeholders in the research institutions, academic, but most importantly, as I said earlier on, our commuters are important because they will help us to bring the solutions that will fulfill their needs.
Much appreciated. And your partners, is there anything that you want to address to them specifically that you think they would have benefited from this?
Yeah, look, I think I would like to perhaps maybe use the opportunity also to thank the GCRO as our partners in doing continuous research in terms of public transport. And we're still going to continue to work with them and other partners. But over and above that, we also want to ask the youth in transport, the young innovators, to also come forward and contact us so that we can see how can they assist us as much as we've done all this great work and we're trying to collaborate with other stakeholders, but we need those young minds to assist us, in improving public transport, but over and above that, to tell us where we're failing so that we can be able to see how we can assist the people of the province to have mobility in a seamless way.
Earlier, at the beginning of this webinar discussion, you mentioned something about people using the Gautrain specifically predominantly during peak hours in the morning and afternoons, and you said there's more that can be done in the day. What are you having in mind in that regard?
Yeah. There's so much capacity that we have during off-peak, and it creates an opportunity for those that are doing shopping, the elderly, as well as the students, because majority of them also travel during those periods, whether they are attending lectures as well. So we've got a student product that we have that they can utilize as part of our system. So that is what we're encouraging all these young ones, the young minds, to use public transport, because public transport is actually the future. You've had a conversation earlier on with Jack. He always used to say, there's no sport like public transport. So they must come and enjoy the sport with us of using public transport, as it makes an impact in their lives and it takes them from point A to point B.
Well, I'd like to thank you and your team for inviting me to be part of the deliberations this morning. I appreciate it. I learned a lot from the public transport knowledge seminar that we conducted this morning. And of course, there are many more challenges still to be overcome. The customers are still there. They still want better experience. There's still better customer service to be offered. And there's innovation that we are working on and we would like to experience it and see it in action. Much appreciated.
Yes, on behalf of the GMA, I think it's proper for me to also thank you as our host for the excellent work that you've done in the conversation, and we're looking forward to have additional conversations in the future.
Sure, thanks very much. And I'd like to thank members of the audience who were with us throughout these deliberations, and we trust that you benefited something, you gained some knowledge, and as you've heard from Siyabonga Mabaso, please get in touch with them if you've got additional ideas that you'd like to share with them in improving the public transport sector in our country. And from us, goodbye to you.
When you know that success is yours to have. When love and affection calls you to reconnect. When you're eager to start a new day with the courage to make yourself a priority. When it's time to explore and broaden your horizons. Gautrain, the symbol of pride that sets your soul on fire. Convenient and sustainable travel with the time to self-reflect. To lead your team to greatness. Making time for family first. Embrace the life journey ahead. Create remarkable stories for your grandchildren to hear. If you live, work, or play in Gauteng, the Gautrain commends your ambition, determination, and that passion for life and the environment, keeping you on track and driving success. Gautrain, for people on the move.
South Africa has 9 provinces, but one, Gauteng, is a little different to the others. It's so highly urbanized, containing 3 cities and several other municipalities, that it functions in many ways more like one big megacity. This megacity has been called the Gauteng City Region, or GCR. The GCR is dense. It's less than 1.5% of the area of South Africa, but contains a quarter of its population and produces a third of its economic output. The Gauteng City Region is also a political project to govern the GCR better and to address the inequities inherited from apartheid. There's a provincial government, 3 metropolitan governments, and several smaller municipalities, which share the responsibility of governing the city region. Understanding this as a city region, not just a province, is part of a project to build coordination and cooperation between these governments to better steer the future of the city region. One of the things that's helping this project is the Gauteng City Region Observatory, or GCRO. The GCRO is an independent academic research institute. In 2008, the Gauteng Provincial Government, the Universities of Johannesburg and the Witwatersrand, and the Local Government Association that represents cities and municipalities came together to form a partnership, pool resources, and launch the GCRO. The GCRO builds a base of data, evidence, and knowledge for better decision-making in the Gauteng City Region. The GCRO produces its own academic research, but it also responds to specific requests from government. It gathers data and makes it available to government and research partners, and builds relationships between government and academic partners in South Africa and abroad. Local government has increasingly come to rely on data from the GCRO to inform planning decisions and to call on GCRO researchers to assist in developing policy. The GCRO innovates with new and different modes of research. It runs the Quality of Life Survey every 2 years. The GCRO explores a range of thematic areas, including economics, governance, social fabric, changing landscapes, sustainability, working with data analytics and visualization. This work produces academic publications, including research reports and occasional papers, as well as books and journal articles. But just as importantly, the GCRO works hard to make its research accessible and understandable to the broader public. On its website, there are interactive maps that anyone can use to explore data about the Gauteng City Region, as well as visualizations and data-driven tools. Every month, the GCRO puts out a map of the month that shows something interesting about the city region. These often match up to events like World Transport Month. It takes large and complex data sets and turns them into data briefs and infographics. GCRO's research reaches across the world. The GCRO is a bold project. In other cities and countries, government agencies are establishing similar independent research platforms to inform public policy. 10 years ago, government and academia took a risk. Government provides money and impetus, and university provides resources, independence, and academic rigor. 10 years on, the risk is paying off, and the results are evident.
Gautrain, the golden thread that connects Gauteng. Get your Swift card for all things work, play, and all that matters to you. Then tap your card and wait for your train.
Train approaching. Stand back from the platform edge.
During the week, take a ride to your area where you will board a bus, which is linked to the train. And for play during weekends, you can use the only bus route operating to the Mall of Africa. If your preferred area does not have a bus route, don't despair, because at just 10 Rand, you can commute onto the coolest shuttle in town, the Gautrain Minibus. You will find the Gautrain Minibuses at Hatfield, Centurion, Marlborough, and Sandton stations respectively. And if you're keen on some family fun during weekends, you can use the Gautrain Minibuses to Monte Casino, which are also linked to the train operating hours. The card that unlocks your journey is hassle-free and cashless. This card has the ability to lead you to work, the mall, a concert, or even a cricket game, whatever you deem as work or play. And the Gautrain is still connecting the people of Gauteng. It's fast, efficient, and integrated with other public transport modes. Here's to you, your journey, and where it may lead you.